Welcome to your July 27th, episode 0, season 0 of the Immigrant's Guide to SciFi World. We're all immigrants now. We're all living in SciFi World. It's emerging all around us, and so we've got to wrap our heads around the stuff up here that's going to shape our the rest of our lives. And some of it here is laid out for you. And I have started at the top with the white sun. The Nazis were wrong. It's not going to be Schwarze Sonne. It's going to be Weiße Sonne. We're going to have this white sun we've got is causing a lot of the issues that we have at the moment in humanity, in the environment, in the actual terra firma, etc. And it's going to precipitate an ice age. You get people debating that, but we'll see over the next few years. Currently, they've shifted from global warming to climate change to try and cover their bets. But in any event, I think it's an ice age. We currently have the shaping parts of the entry, the birth into the sci-fi world as a relatively painful, as all births should be, emergence, right? And in order for something new to come into existence, a lot of old shit has to die off. A lot of the old shit everybody's lived with all their lives, myself included, the corruption, eruption, we're all living in with officialdom lying all the time and science dying as a result of that, leading to the CCP virus getting out and causing the disease we've all got. All around now we have to live with this bioweapon. And all the other nasties, okay? All the nuke plants and that kind of thing. We have the USA in schism at the moment. We've got these black and white people, the SJWs, who scare the crap out of me because these people could not run nuclear power plants if they tried. And if they take over, they're going to have to. So we got real issues. I won't go into that. But in any event, so we've got all of these various different things that are shaping our environment and are going to be potential opportunities and potential obstacles, thus equaling challenges as we go forward. And they start at the sun, like I say, with it shifting from the yellow sun of my birth to this white sun that we have now, which is an entirely different band of radiation, to the point where we actually have UVC reaching the surface of the planet, something that had never happened until this millennium in our understanding. I think it's related to the ice age because I'm seeing a lot of the things in the oceans, everything from the new current, from the slowdown of the global current heat exchange, the creation of the giant cold spot in the North Atlantic, oddly enough, people don't think of it this way, but also the calving, all of the ice flows breaking off. And if the West Atlantic, or if the Atlantic ice sheet breaks and we get that rogue giant iceberg breaking off, then that's a for sure sign that the ice age is very, very imminent. And this has to do not with the idea that the ice is melting on the poles, but rather that ice is going to calve off and be replaced by other ice. So the net ice gain grows exponentially as soon as there's more room for this new ice to accrue. There are actually physical problems with the ice building up too deep, so to speak, right? So it must break off as we get into this cycle of more and more energy going in through the poles, bringing in a colder interaction, causing more ice buildup at both areas. But part of the process of going into an ice age is the spreading of ice flows. And so I'm a sailor, I'm a small boat sailor. I've had an interest in the history of small boat sailors since I was probably 8 years old, maybe, and have been deep into that, reading everything I could get in as many languages as I could ever run across and have a hope of translating. And, it'd be little snips of things here and there, some guy's journal, because not much was published through the years by small boat sailors, although a lot of them just wrote extensively. And so you find some really interesting stuff in the small boat sailor world in terms of descriptions of these Egyptian stele, these navigation markers that used to be all over the Louisiana Delta, as well as in 2 places that I know of in Australia. And so the Egyptians had sailed both areas to the point where they'd put in navigation markers. In the Americas, the navigation markers led them up to the main channel for what at that time was the Missouri-Mississippi confluence. And the Smithsonian has these. The Smithsonian, they were taken out in the 1800s in this big clean up the continent move that put all kinds of stuff into hiding. But in any event, digression. But at that time, okay, so a lot of the old documents talk about the conditions under which things like early Norwegian, which is to say Viking, expeditions to the New World and the Faroe Islands and a few of these things, in which they had to navigate many more ice flows than we have now. And that was as a result of a bust-up of a mini ice age. Going into an ice age and coming out of it, you have these ice flows. There are different kinds of ice flows, different kinds of icebergs in both instances, though. And the ones in the literature that you would find in these discussions of the conditions that the navigators had to deal with were the trailing edge of the ice age that had so greatly affected Europe, causing changes in the Germanic people's diets, causing changes in the raiding patterns of the Scandinavian Vikings, et cetera, right? And it led to a certain kind of slavery in existence at the time, as well as the development of particular kinds of indigenous medicines in both the Germanic and Scandinavian peoples. So I don't know why we need to get off on that particularly. But, so anyway, we're going to see ice flows. If we see relatively soon in the next couple of years this giant shift in the ice in Antarctica, then we can prepare for something fairly rapid. Otherwise, we're probably on schedule for something like 2041 for that to occur. It can occur at any time. It's one of those things where we have sort of an opening window, a widening window. The further we go on, the more likely it is to appear. We're also going to see not only within the currents themselves, especially as they travel through the pelagic part of the ocean, which is the desert part, right? The ocean is a desert basically in the middle part of it. And we're going to see some major changes here as we get conditions that are fundamentally electric in nature, all right? And these electrical conditions are going to cause changes in the middle of the ocean that will affect things like CO2 and other what we call greenhouse gases, as well as feeding patterns, biota, the spread and the ebb of the influences of the benthic areas here and the upwelling and so on. All of that's going to be altered by the currents. And as these current changes, this electrical change is going to alter our generalized climate. And that's going to be, again, part of our ice age as we go forward over these next few years. Now, as an aside, by the way, we can take a diversion into some woo-woo stuff. A lot of this description of SciFi World is, well, all of it right at the moment is a merge between data sets that I'd had developed from 2003 onward, and actually earlier than that, from the very first time we did the runs in 97, okay, because that was when sun disease first started showing up, and sun disease, I'm saying, is related to the CCP virus, is the description of the CCP virus that we're living through at the moment. But in any event, so this entire description of SciFi World originates from 97, kept going all the way through and builds, and a lot of these are data sets that are now emerging, so in many of these cases I've put in this little description, and over future episodes here have put in language for what's actually on the ground, and I'll try and tie it into language out of the reports as we go forward, right? And so we're going to have this greater global depression. We're going to be boxed in by it. It's not a, it's going to emerge differently than people had imagined because of the influence of the Ice Age on everything, and because we will have people that will recognize it's not a failure of capitalism or meritocracies or incentive-based systems. What it is a failure of stems from the corruption eruption of these last few decades that globalism brought in. Now, we need globalism, we just don't need a global elite telling us all what the fuck to do, okay? But this greater global depression is not a failure of capitalism. As I say, it's a corruption of capitalism. But that's going to come out in the fore here as we run into this situation where there's a revolution towards capitalism within China. So we're going to have a Chinese revolution. See, all this stuff's going to happen over this as we emerge into sci-fi world. China's going to bust up probably into 7 different regions. The reason it's going to bust up is because the CCP is seriously fucked up and let loose this virus. Plus, there's infighting in the CCP, so it's not a cohesive whole. So there's going to be power vacuums. There's going to be all kinds of thrashing around within the party itself, just as China is hit by yet another round of the virus, and then the floods, and then a debt crisis that's going to just shock the world, which is actually going to drive people towards the US dollar, which is going to be actually part of propping up the USA or insulating us from some parts of the greater global depression, okay? But the debt crisis here is also going to be part of the floods and the famine that's going to emerge over this year, over the rest of this year and into next year and into the year after that, so in through 2022. This CCP bust-up is a multi-year process. China bust-up is a multi-year process, although we're going to get a very rapid expansion of systems and things degrading inside China as we go forward due to some major events that will transpire in a short period of time, almost back to back. So the floods will lead to the famine. The famine's a little further out down the road, but the floods are going to be part of the revolution because it's going to be the floods and the dam breaking and everything is going to be such a huge part of showing the failure of the CCP in its ideology, in spreading that ideology as a disease all the way through the planet and releasing the virus on everybody, including the Chinese people. And so as the floods come on in, then the virus is going to get even worse. It's going to be basically hell to be in China for a while. And it's going to be leading to this separation, the power vacuums, the revolutions, all of that kind of stuff, right? Against the background of the problems being generated by the Ice Age. And at the same time, the CCP is going to try and do this rush into space to show how great they are. So don't be surprised to see the CCP try and do all sorts of propaganda, rah-rah boys kind of thing, right? To try and rally around the flag, so to speak, and get people to go forward. But the CCP is not China. It's not a Chinese ethos. It is imposed on China it's like the Soviet Union in that sense. Soviet Union is not Russia, as we understand, now that we have Russia back, and we had Russia before the Soviet Union, so Russia exists and the Soviet Union was an idea and ideology that simply has faded away. Same thing's going to happen with the CCP, as well, actually, as the social justice warrior shit here in the U.S., ultimately from the stresses placed on the planet by the white sun period and the ice age that we're going into. However, entirely different pathways to the degradation of both ideologies, okay, or which are linked in any event. So the CCP is basically a giant part of the global corruption eruption, which is part of globalism, which is going to lead to this greater global depression. But in the middle of all this greater global depression, not in the middle of it, because actually it's at the beginning of it, we've got this push into space here. And this push into space is going to be a versus, okay? So you're going to have the USA's push into space be organically driven because of issues relative to our schism and the corruption, eruption, and all of that, but also being impacted by the fact that the CCP is going to try and get into space with their own, communism dominates the space, blah, 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 big shoe hammering on that metaphor or that image is lost, but dominating and that kind of thing. In the midst of the bankruptcy of the debt system within China, and the explosion here. Okay, so what's going to set off a lot of this is the destruction of the Chinese property system, their ability to trade and move deeds of trust on property, because that was allowed sort of under the Chinese Communist Party, under the CCP, as a relatively recent move, and people got into trading property, and it ended up propping up all of these shadow banks, they call them, which are basically mortgage companies. And hedge funds that back the mortgage companies, and insurance companies that sort of back the hedge funds that sort of back the mortgage companies, and it's all loosey-goosey and all sort of tied together by the Chinese Communist Party of corruption. And we'll give you these documents if you give me this bribe. And so all that's going to go when the dam goes, and there's no property there to claim anymore. A giant swath of that property has been destroyed, as well as the ability for it to be productive for providing food, getting out of the floods, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the debt structure, being so tied to the property market, will crash hugely because of the giant over-leveraging and the fact that much of it is actually concentrated in the area that's going to be destroyed as a result of the Three Gorges hyper-flooding. But it's going to lead to It's going to increase the pressure on the Chinese People's Revolution against the CCP, which is then going to try and, during that period of time, it's going to try and get more space shit going, which is going to get us to be more space focused. We're going to have more people with the debt stuff crashing turn towards trying to get wealth out of the country, but also trying to get survival. And a lot of it's going to focus back in on capitalism, which will bring us back in the U.S. to an examination of capitalism and its failures to the subsequent generations, okay? And this failure to subsequent generations has been ongoing. My generation is not as wealthy as the generation before us, except in the hands of a very narrow group of people because they used corruption to manipulate the laws and freeze people out and bring it all in. All right, and it's not racial, it's not religious. There is a group of interlinked, self-serving elites that can be described in any number of ways as a mafia, as a clique, as a cabal, as any number of descriptions, okay? And they're global, they use nasty means to keep power and control things, and all of these kind of evils that we can easily imagine indeed do exist, and these individuals are indeed in that situation where they've been controlling us, and as a natural result of this, they've been pulling and aggregating money towards themselves and wealth towards themselves. Now, this has been true of people in China as well as people in the U.S., and it's come to the point where we have such a lopsided pyramid, right? Where you have all of the rich people up here, and the pyramid is way fucking flat, and all the rest of us are all out here. Excuse me. We're all trying to make do out here. And you got the whole global elite concentrated in that little bubble, and basically it can't continue, right? And we're at that point where it's breaking down because we have whole generations here in the U.S. that are not been that have not been had no path into being enabled within the system. You can't blame the millennials. You can blame the people that taught the millennials. You can blame the fucking communists in the system. You can blame the CCP because they actively have been infiltrating the USA education system here. For the last 40 years, and they're part of our science dying, officialdom lying, and the corruption eruption. And they took advantage of it. So we can, well, look at the nasty little drawing. We can blame the CCP for a lot of this, right? But we've also got to accept the responsibilities that capitalism has failed. It's not failed as a system, all right? That's bullshit. It's incentive-based. It's a meritocracy. I'm convinced that the people that are really pissed and out there doing shit would love to be able to convert their energy into something far more productive. The people that are exercising destructive energy are also people that usually have within them the capacity to be builders. And what you're seeing is that building energy being frustrated because there's no outlet for it, right? This is why we need to get young men into martial arts, to give them an outlet for the testosterone so they don't go batshit crazy. That's basically what's going on here at a huge level, especially since we've got this sun putting out all kinds of non-yellow rays now that are giving us all issues. And our blank sun, right, is also participating by letting more energy through. And this was part of the data sets that we'd seen way back in the day. Now, I'm going to erase a little bit of this just so it's a little bit more clear here. Part of this whole officialdom lying thing and the emergence into SciFi World, at least into the data, way back in the day, was being driven by, in our data sets, by a sense of desperation. Now, at the time, I had thought that the desperation was within officialdom and related to the Greater Global Depression, because the data sets seem to suggest that we went into SciFi World because of secrets revealed about things like UFOs and this really super controversial subject that I'll mention briefly at the very end of this, and hopefully it won't be snatched by the algos and cause this video to be deleted. But the secrets revealed was a major part of our emergence into SciFi World. You know, SciFi World is the whole idea of much more energy for the human population, so that anybody that's a frustrated individual will have the energy to create and make what they want without having to. And once we have more energy for the human for humanity, just the way that Tesla wrote a book about this. Nikola Tesla wrote a book about this, about getting more energy into humanity and the things that will happen from it. And that whole aspect of SciFi World, free energy, field force manipulation for anti-gravity, all of this kind of stuff, all of that sort of thing, was as an aspect of Secrets Revealed. Now, the Secrets Revealed things are happening now. We're seeing discussions about UFOs, UAPs, off-world or prehistory materials that we can't figure out, that we can't duplicate. In our data sets, we had associated with the Ice Age, curiously, there's going to be melting in areas like Siberia and Antarctica that are going to lead to discoveries. These discoveries are going to also be associated with some stuff that has yet to bubble up out of the Arctic. They're going to relate to geology, to human history, and to history of other beings that have been here on Earth in the ancient past or more near times. All of these are aspects and attributes of the SciFi World sets that we had in the original data, some of which are now appearing to show up, where we hear that Bob Lazar, for instance, may have been quite accurate in what he relayed, in that maybe one or more of the UFOs in Area 51, maybe one or more of those UFOs are basically ancient. And we're looking at something that, well, we're trying to duplicate a UFO that, is a couple of million years old and crashed and everybody rotted by now. But who knows, right? But we do know that there is a move towards secrets revealed. This was coincident within our data set with the sun disease popping off, which we have the virus and the COVID and so on. And we have the political schisms appearing. We have the science dying as a result of the corruption. The science dying means that we have a lot of other people dying because they're going to be virus deniers or disease deniers, and they're not going to grasp what's going on, and they won't take appropriate measures, especially this winter. And so it's going to be really chaotic over these next this next while, okay? So the people that are out rioting now are going to be placing themselves over these next couple of months at very great risk of getting the COVID, the CCP virus, getting the COVID disease. They're going to be sleeping during the day. They go out at night. They don't get adequate UVB light, which is between 10 and 2, 10 and 3 in some areas. They're going to have lower vitamin D. They're not going to be having adequate diet, and so on. And the CCP virus is going to be very unforgiving, and we have to understand we're going to be living with it for generations, insofar as I can tell. So the only way to get real with it is to get your vitamin D higher than 40 nanograms per milliliter, which probably means you need to be taking about, depending on your size, maybe anywhere from 2 to 10,000 international units a day, even in the summer, even in the acquiring sunlight, right? Mine level is at 63. Nobody on the planet that had their vitamin D over 40 nanograms per milliliter presented at a hospital with the virus, which means they did not get ill. They didn't get the virus, or if they acquired it, their body has the necessary means to shed it and get rid of it so that they didn't present any kind of symptoms, even to themselves, that ever forced them to deal with it in any medical fashion. So that's kind of like the baseline. There's nobody in hospitals with that level or higher. And anybody that died from it usually had 20 nanograms per milliliter or lower, hugely vitamin D insufficient. Now, as part of this, you're going to be needing to take vitamin C at the level of 20 micrograms per pound. So I'm taking 6 to 10 grams of liposomal and ascorbic acid forms of vitamin C a day to try and get as close to 10 grams in me. Maybe I'm absorbing 8.5 to 9 grams, who knows. But it's a lot of vitamin C, and I feel great, and I'm out here doing weird shit, that kind of thing, so I'm quite happy with it all. And I won't get the virus, all right? I don't have to worry about it, but because I'm going to maintain this even through the winter. Even through the winter. Now, in the winter, I will up the amount of vitamin D I take to compensate for the fact that I can't go out and spend time in the sun, getting the melanin to float around in my body and vitamin D to get made. So where are we at? Anyway, so in our data sets, we had desperation as the word that was driving the release of the secrets revealed part of it. And it was connected to the greater global depression and the breakdown of globalism. But I always saw it as I misinterpreted it being a motive, or for whom it was a motive, because I thought that desperation was a motive for officialdom to try and save their ass as globalists and to maintain global power would release the hidden secrets about the UFOs, the more energy to humans, yada, 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 and that was why it emerged, which is all wrong. Turns out, it's everybody else being desperate, it's all of us being desperate, it's the anybody but the global elites that are pushing on getting this information out and changing the nature of humanity and humanity's technology. And of course, this is the going into, we can characterize it as going into space, but SciFi World, the increase in the energy, the combinoric proliferation of new kinds of inventions around that energy, the intergalactic internet for one, tying into the other civilizations, at least via communications. All of these kind of things cause a giant creativity eruption that does away with, a lot of the problems from the CCP and allows China, the 7 nations of China, the 7 sisters, to rebuild, and allows the USA to overcome the schism and to emerge stronger, even though more diverse, blah, 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 blah. So a lot of this stuff, because humanity as a whole ends up with this new focus, right? And it's the emergence, perhaps, if you want to characterize it that way, and I'm certain that some academics will do so, the emergence of a pan-global human ethos, something we've never had before. So an ethos that we can all buy into regardless of our political persuasions and our religious creed or wackadoodle ideas, all right? And so it's kind of like onward, upward, into space, that kind of thing, right? Anyway, though, there at the moment, there's a lot of right thinking, well deliberate thinking, well motivated people that are trying to come up with solutions to the USA schism, which is being driven by this thin layer through our social order that has insinuated itself into positions of power in places in corporations and federal government and all of this kind of thing, which really is kind of funny when you think about it. There's many more social justice warriors in the federal government, and it's funny that they're on the outside beating against the courthouse as well. But it's part of this critical thinking and this diversity of tactics and all this other shit. But in any event, though, there's a lot of well-meaning people that are saying that they can come up with a political solution for this situation. But I'm saying it's not a political situation, that basically it's coming down to the debt levels, the USA dollar, the global debt levels, the degradation of the money over time, the freezing of these generations not out of the political process so much, but out of the process of possibility of economic growth, of economic participation in a grander society, of their lives counting for themselves, their families, their culture, blah, 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 right? Getting frozen out of that makes you one frustrated son of a bitch. And unless you devise something, which is very unlikely because the freezing process is related to this corruption eruption, unless you can devise a method to get in, you're going to continue to be frustrated, and you'll end up, doing things to vent that frustration because there's no other option for you. And that's where we're at now. So in my opinion, there is no political solution that will emerge for this situation, and that what we need and what is actually happening is that we need a non-political situation that will do away with a lot of these problems by showing us what's going on in the Ice Age and everything else. It'll allow us all to frame where we're going to be in the next few decades and what our children's children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are going to have to live through. By going into the secrets revealed, it'll show the corruption eruption and why science has been dying and why officialdom has been lying, and how the corruption is engineered into the schism here by the CCP and all of their nasty little agents, and why we're at this particular place relative to the CCP versus the USA and vice versa, right? And why capitalism failed relative to particular generations, and how we can get out of it. In my opinion, the way to get out of it is to pursue the secrets revealed, to find out why and how all of this stuff's been going on. What do these people know? What do they don't know? Because we can't continue with officialdom lying, because it's causing science to continue to die and the corruption eruption to continue. And we know that that's breaking down right now. And it's only a matter of time. Unless there is a creation, a deliberate series of policies initiated to have avenues for the millennial generations and those generations that follow to participate successfully in the greater part of society, there's absolutely no incentive for any of us to continue with the systems that are in place at the moment. I say that for myself, even as an aging person who should be into retirement, because unless we have these avenues, by the time my body breaks down further to the point where I need care, there won't be people to potentially care for me. I'll be like the rest of all of us animals. I'll be going off into the woods to die alone, a rather agonizing sort of a death, because there won't be drugs, there won't be individuals to provide care, this sort of thing. And it will affect all generations, and we'll be having a generalized break of the social order, because the people that are trying to reform it don't have the skills to replace it. And that's our big issue, one of our big issues in my mind at this moment. These are very educated or very schooled people. They have degrees, and they have great understanding of social concepts that are beyond my grasp, because they emerged after my brief stint with higher education. And but these individuals do not know how to run things and build things, because their lives have never demanded that of them as a challenge, most of them. And so we're going to be in a really world of hurt if the this direction continues. And as a note on this is exactly what has happened to the CCP, and we will see this occur. We will see the fruits of this particular plant, this approach, this policy, will bear out here relatively soon, as the infrastructure and the dams and the flooding and all of this within China occur. The People's Liberation Army is going to fail the Chinese people. It won't be primarily it won't be the fault of the army per se. There will be great heroes in there. There will be the usual standouts, but the People's Liberation Army will fundamentally, logistically collapse under the load and the conflicting demands being placed on them by the CCP during this time of great crisis over the rest of this year within China. And that will be a direct reflection of the same kind of influences within the PLA and within those two generations within China that we've got within the millennials and these other generations behind them. So there's words for, descriptive words for why that occurred, and it really doesn't matter to me. We have to live with the situation as it is now. And so we're going to find ourselves in a very peculiar kind of a time. I actually am sort of looking forward to certain aspects of it, because the generalized breakdown of academic science, the fact that science is dying because of the corruption of the process by peer review, and the corruption of the process by gatekeeping of information and that sort of thing, is actually going to mean that our space won't be dominated by the lying aspect of things, but it'll be dominated by what was learned, or should have been learned, in Area 51, which is that, and I promised to mention this word, that this is going to reemerge as the driving force into there. And you dare not mention that word. You haven't been able to do it since, I think it was 1887. Might have been 1878. I always get this thing, because of dyslexia, I always get it all. And it's the M&M experiment. If you're not familiar with it, you soon will be, as we start shifting over into a new physics here. And this new physics is going to flow from the stuff that we should have learned from Area 51 and the woo-woo secrets revealed around UFOs or UAPs or whatever the fuck we're going to call them. And also benthic crawlers, by the way. This is really cool too. This is going to emerge as a interesting diversion. I don't know how soon. It was in our data sets relative to the Siberia, Antarctica, and so on discoveries. And you'll note that if you've been paying attention, that some shit's coming out of Antarctica about the methane coming up, and there's going to be more discoveries about stuff happening in Antarctica. And one of the things that in that period of time in our data sets was that we were going to see this thing about the benthic crawlers, these gigantic machines that are apparently still functioning to some degree and are gigantically ancient, that are mining kind of machines, in my understanding of what will be presented. But they'll be still functioning, and I think it's going to happen because one of them's going to emerge, like get off course and crawl up where it shouldn't, that sort of thing. Anyway, or will be exposed. It's part of the secrets revealed. This was also part of all the riot shit too, by the way, that at some point the riots would tumble into NSA facilities, and we'd get, I thought at the time I was writing this that it would be food riots, that because we had all of this stuff about the famine, which is indeed coming, so prepare for that. Learn to grow food, because the famine is not a brief thing where we're going to recover right away. It's going to take a long time, so get your shit together and prepare to provide for yourselves and your family for a number of years, as much as you can, because it'll be hard to come by otherwise, right? So anyway, though, but these benthic crawlers are going to pop up during this whole thing about the Antarctic discoveries. All of this stuff is all emerging in terms of these data sets that we had years ago. And it describes the world we're in right now and will be in for the foreseeable future. And it's going to be quite interesting. We won't be bored. I'm going to try and spend as much time as I can messing about with the stuff here, and see if I can't get a jump on what these guys learned there in order to be able to do some of the other stuff. A lot of it's related to magnets. So anyway, or magnets reveal a lot of it, let me put it that way. I think that's it. I don't think I've got anything else on here. No, corruption, dollars. We're going to have a dollar surge temporarily. The cryptos are going to go batshit. Silver, gold going to go batshit. Then there will be some little dips. 3 pullbacks on cryptos after big jumps. More crocodile teeth as we go into the end of the year. Silver is going to go up. There'll be the dishoarding, and then we're going to see something technologically that'll boost silver, and we'll see that bifurcation as they hunt for different kinds of silver molecules. It'll make one part of the silver world more desirable, simply because it'll be able to be used in technology better. That's a number of years out. I don't know how many. I don't know how many years it'll take for that to emerge. This, by the way, is going to emerge because it'll actually turn out to be effective, right? So it doesn't matter if, like it wouldn't matter if Einstein was 100% wrong if I could use Einstein's or Feynman's understanding or Eric Weinstein's understanding of things in order to engineer my floating RV, my recreational vehicle, right? That I'm going to go float about. Okay, so if Eric Weinstein or Feynman or Einstein, if any of these guys had an understanding that presented me with the conceptual tools to allow me to build my floating RV thing that duplicates what we see with the UFOs and allows me to go off and stuff, then it's like, fine, hey, I'm willing to agree their view of the world functioning, works, it's good, we can live with it, right? And it's like we can call it anything we want, string theory, unified crystalline geometry, any fucking thing we want, right? He's right, it's geometry, but the geometry is all related to the fluid aspects that we find in this particular understanding of things. But in any event, that's what I'm saying here. One of the things in our data sets way the hell back when was that at the point that academic science took a big hit, and it was in our data, and you'll see if you go read the reports and stuff, those old reports, you'll see that we had universities dying and all of this kind of stuff for entirely different reasons. Again, had put it down to the global depression, not the virus impacts and so on. But the universities are going to die, and the whole education system's going to, or schooling system's going to go puke, and we're going to have to rebuild. In any event, though, so during this period of time, this was to resurrect itself, and again, it would do so because, like Nikola Tesla's work, it would be effective, it would work, it would function. Ergo, we would use it. And so those of us that are early adopters, so to speak, are quite happy because we'll get our floaty RVs ahead of everybody else. Anyway, so SciFi World's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very risky like any other world, but it's going to be cool as hell as we step through it. And so I'll do more of these as more of the SciFi World stuff emerges into our reality. Oh yeah. And if you need to sleep, get your pure sleep stuff. It helps. It really does. You know, I'm not bullshitting you. So anyway, try it out. I'll put a link in, and it's on my website. I've stripped down everything on the website as I get into the magnets. I'm going to do other postings and that kind of thing. So we'll have other materials. I have had some major breakthroughs in the world of this here, and I'm going to be filing patents not about that particular word because the patent office refuses to use it. You can't reference anything that's related to that and try and get a patent through, but I actually have some understanding and can now make some effective devices, methods, and fundamental understandings around magnets that did not do and does not exist absent the work I put into it here. And so I'm going to, fill those out. It's a pain in the ass to do patent application documents, especially if, the federal government were going to collapse. I don't think that's the case. But they're going to need this kind of shit as part of the release of the secrets revealed during this time of desperation. So there you go. Bye, everybody.